was a truly riveting, brutally honest, yeah, maybe just, the house lights are, we can't really, okay. Anyway, it was a truly riveting, brutally honest, I would say very, very brave movie.
Yeah,
Your mic's on.
Oh, the mics are not on, oh.
No, it's on.
Is it on? Is it on now? Oh, there we go. All right. Okay. Well, once again, it was just an extremely riveting, I think, movie. Very, very brave of you to make that movie and to show this movie here in Point Reyes, where you shot it. I just want to state that I met Skylar a few months ago, and at the time he had a short version of this, which I watched. And when we thought of doing this film festival, I approached him and said, "Do you think you could just, build on this?" And so he spent the last month putting this together. So you didn't have a lot of time to put it together, and it was.
You're the first one.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna be my co-star.
Wow, he's a tough guy. He's got all these spikes.
Well, I commented outside, I was like, it's interesting how the vegans that are for the planet wear so much black. And so I changed him into his, apparently a vegan outfit.
That's pretty funny. Well, anyway, Skylar, tell us a little bit about your journey from making films about sharks to farmed animals.
Well, the more time you spend on the topic of, preservation, conservation, no matter whether it's in the ocean or on the land, you realize that everything's connected. And this monoculture world that we live in isn't real. It's not what anything else participates in. And I was someone who was preaching, saving the sharks and this or that while, eating a steak with my other hand. And, it's a journey. It's a journey. It was a way of life. I was brought up that way. And change is difficult for humans. But there's things that you just can't ignore. And at some point you have to walk the walk. And, like learning that chicken eat more fish than sharks do. Makes you think.
Well, chicken eat more fish than sharks do.
That's how much we're pulling out of the oceans.
Yeah. And I think you grew up in ag land as well too, and you did too. Were you on a ranch?
No, my dad and mom, both sides, are from ranching in Idaho. My dad grew up on a ranch, so I'm sympathetic towards ranchers. So it's a tough transition, but it's one that has to be done, that's for sure.
From as one filmmaker to another, I would love to sort of get your. Can you hear me without a mic?
Yes.
I have a loud voice. I would love to sort of just have you guys sort of riff off each other and talk about both of your journeys to filmmaking. It's such a powerful platform for creating social change, and where you guys are crossing over. And
Yeah, I'll just start. I want to start. It was really well done. I'm glad you really spent a lot of time on the cabs. It's just so sad. I just want to share a story. Recently, I live in LA now, and I was at Cafe Gratitude, which you usually don't go. I thought when the whole thing happened with Cafe Gratitude and the Be Love Farms, where they found out.
Explain that.
Yeah, Be Love Farms, the Cafe Gratitude, they came out that all of a sudden they're raising and killing cows. And it was just like, it was so hard because I used to promote them so much. And I just didn't go to Cafe Gratitude for a while, and I thought it was just the parents, but then I went down in LA and went to, I thought it was just the sons that they owned it. Anyway, it was about a couple months ago, and the son was there, and I can't remember his name, but we had a discussion, and he promotes it too. And so it's not that they're actually doing it, he's actually very actively promoting that this is the way to regenerate soil. And it is so absurd, and then we had this long, he's super nice, I'm sorry I forgot his name, very, very nice guy. Open discussion, it was about a half hour. And we're just going back and forth with the numbers, and he's not taking into consideration the water use, the land use for the other wild animals. And then it finally got to the time, I said, how about this? we'll do $100,000 challenge where you can do 1 acre, 5 acres, 10 acres, and you do anything with cows or chickens or pigs or whatever on your acreage, and then on the same one right next to it, we'll do veganic farming. So to settle it once and for all. And it's so easy to do, and I did this with the Marin Farms, I can't remember her name, so this was about a year ago. I gave her the challenge too. So if anyone can like just help make this, I've done a public thing, we're gonna do a whole public announcement for a challenge for this, just to get it done once and for all. It is so ridiculous. So yeah.
So what happened?
He said he was do it, and he talked to his board, and then working on another film, and we're just watching this just made me I'm so busy, but just reminded me I have to contact him and really make this an official challenge. He said he would do it, but I think at the end of the day, at the very end, he was making excuses. And I said also at the end of whatever the numbers are, you have to. I'd like for you to we film you killing the cow. Or going to the slaughterhouse somehow, or if it's a chicken or a pig, and you have to look the animal in the eyes. And that's the part where he softened up, and that's when the conversation kind of turned where he didn't want to talk about that part. Because they're animals, and regardless of the sustainability at the end of the day, that's the big thing too, and just remind me of that.
Skylar, I know you didn't have any interviews in this. I know you interviewed some people about it. Did you have a chance to talk to any ranchers at all?
Not practicing ranchers, more like retired, reformed ranchers. The shark film I'm working on right now has, hours and hours of interview footage that I'm going through, and this was just supposed to be a passion project. It was almost like me just needing to get it out. It wasn't really meant to be a documentary. It was just so upsetting to me. The discovery of those pins was accidental, and then, the first time I went out there, we shot that right on the spot, and that was just. And I've got a lot more of that. I carried on forever because it really bothered me deeply. And it's not like I'm unaware that it happens, but it was happening where I go to try and escape from things like that. As far as his film and my film, I rewatched Kip's film recently, and statistics are huge, numbers are huge in Kip's film, and let's talk about poop for a while, because the numbers that his film exposes are mind-blowing. But when you go and you look at this relatively small section of land and find out how much the difficulty of dealing with waste just there, then you start to be able to believe his staggering statistics. But really what I want to get at with talking about the poop is the incredible system that nature already has in place and its own means of handling so many animals pre-European times. One number that didn't make it in my film was that there were estimated 500,000 tule elk in California pre-European. And then add on to that all the other animals that were there. That's one species of all the species that we slaughtered. And yet, the land wasn't a desert. It was full of life. There was a system in place. And us coming in and trying to turn it into another system doesn't work.
That's one of the things that people often do not think about is the impact of animal agriculture on wildlife. We often just think about the poor cows or the chickens in factory farms, but we don't realize that the obliteration of wildlife is largely due to animal agriculture, the expense of that. There's the U.S. Wildlife Services is an organization, a government services, whose sole purpose exists to exterminate wildlife that compete with livestock for either grazing land or space. So it's, to become a wildlife lover, to say that and then to continue to eat animals is sort of...
There's a lot of this scapegoating going on right now. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to talk about the southern resident orcas. And because, in Kip's film, not to give too much away about it, please stick around and watch it, talks about the scapegoating of other animals as problems and going out and culling them and killing them to make way for more cattle. And now we're scapegoating sea lions. who are eating too much fish. Well, we're not putting any regulations on the fishing industry, but instead of, breaching dams and allowing the salmon to reproduce and giving up that land and allowing the orcas to eat, we're going to kill off a different species that could probably, barely fill these two buildings combined, but there's too many of them eating fish. We have all these distractions and fake solutions that we turn to instead of changing our own actual behavior.
And they have that, when you're talking about the wildlife service, they have, every year they have the total of how many animals are killed from, predominantly by ranching, and it's something like, was it 40,000 or 70,000 coyotes, hundreds and hundreds of black bears. I could not believe black bears are actually killed. And then cougars, and on and on and on. And it's
birds.
all, and birds,
Yeah.
and it just goes on. And I was just thinking, and watching this too, if you had a think tank of the smartest people, almost to try to come up, let's come up with the most disturbing product in the entire world, and ethically and sustainably, you could not come up with something worse than milk. Think about it, every part of it, and then especially you're saying that it goes into the rivers, and then it destroys the rivers, destroys wildlife, and across the board, and then taking mothers away, and then it's just liquid sadness. It's just everything about it is just so bad.
Yeah, I made a short online about, I was almost laughing out loud because I was asking, okay, I get it. You want to steal the milk so that we can sell it, but why do the babies have to be all alone? Well, it's because they're denied the colostrum from the mothers, which keeps them healthy, and so in order for them not to spread disease to the other cows, they have to be in isolation. So instead of giving them what they're supposed to have, our solution is to keep them isolated and live lonely lives. I mean, you couldn't make this up in Hollywood if you did acid and got in a room with some people.
Now, I have a question for both of you. I don't know how much you know about this, but a lot of the argument for, out here they have something called the Marin Carbon Project, and there is a lot of emphasis here on something called rotational grazing and regenerative agriculture. These are sort of buzz terms for sustainability. And the idea that ruminants are necessary for carbon sequestration. Now, there are ruminants such as elk, but people today, many people believe that cows are necessary in order to reverse climate change because of carbon sequestration. I don't know, what do you guys know about that, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that was a discussion with the, what's the son's name? Cafe Gratitude, that's what we're talking about. That's what they propose. And it's so absurd because the efficiency of a cow and what comes out, it's like saying we're going to put fossil fuels back into the ground by getting more cars because some of the cars leak oil. I mean, it's guzzling gas, and it's the efficiency, and it's one of those, the conversation is so crazy that people actually still believe it, even though it's been totally debunked, the whole Alan Savory, because it's really just common sense of something comes in and only a fraction comes out, when again, there's veganic agriculture where you can do the same thing, veganic composting, and that competition I was saying about 1 acre, 1 acre. I think I said the bet will be, or the challenge. Not only will it grow more, it'll grow probably 5 to 10 times more. Like that will be, if not 20 times more. And the fact that they think that you can regenerate something by stripping away of minerals.
While I was making this, I got bombarded with a lot of information. And one of the more interesting ones along this topic was that the ranchers were possibly even going to make money off of a solution which involved them storing carbon in the manure, so they were actually doing us a favor. And the thing is, what sharp filmmaking has taught me and carries over to everything is that people will believe what they want to believe, and they will believe what they hear that supports their existing way of life, no matter how ridiculous it is. Doesn't matter what the statistics are. And I wish we'd get back to opening our eyes, because I can't drive from the Bay Area to Yosemite without seeing agriculture on both sides the entire drive, or from there to the Bay with the exact same thing. We are heading toward a planet of us and our food, and none of the beauty and enrichment that was here for us in the first place.
Well, that's because about half the land of the United States, arable land, is actually devoted to animal agriculture. So that's an astounding number. Have you guys read that study that was published in Science. It's the most comprehensive study on sustainable farming in the world, led by Oxford University, and they studied over 40,000 farms across 119 countries. And the idea was to figure out what are the most sustainable ways to farm. And they were researching everything, including rotational grazing and all of that. And a year into the study, the lead researcher became vegan and concluded that there was no sustainable form of animal agriculture. There are anecdotally some success stories, but it's simply anecdotal and you just can't scale it. You can't replicate that across the world, and therefore it's just not a solution. So he became vegan, and his statement was that the single biggest way to reverse climate change is through adopting a vegan diet.
I'll say, has anyone heard of Polyface Farms in Virginia? Joel Salatin, he's the one that's like the messiah of that. And he said it's a closed loop system, and an investigative journalist, I think he was very casual, he went in and did a little secret, wasn't even that hard to find, found out he was taking in tens of thousands of feed for the chickens. And like, where does that come from? And then so that whole thing just got, just another myth that was blown to pieces. This is not true.
So, Kip, while you're here, I'd like to find out what are you working on today? I know you've done What the Health and Cowspiracy, but I'm sure the audience would love to hear about what you're working on if you can speak about
I
it.
can speak a little bit about one's Seaspiracy, and that's, like that is, was anyone at CowCon? We actually showed the trailer kind of by accident. It was kind of by mistake. We got it. But Seaspiracy, and it's with following, his name's Ali Tabrizi. He goes by I think it was a friendly activist, but he hasn't done anything for about 2 years. Him and his now fiance, it's just basically them two. And it kind of follows him as my journey, but he's the protagonist. And I mean, it's like Cowspiracy of the oceans. I mean, he goes, we've been working on it for about 2 years now, and it goes so deep into the oceans and the fish. And people are worried about climate change and this and that, but the biggest thing probably is our oceans. It's what Paul Watson says of Sea Shepherd. When the oceans die, we die, like that. And it's just something that no one talks about. And so it's a really big film. It's coming along really well. I'm super excited for it. And that will be by the end of the year. And I don't know if I'm allowed to even talk about it though, actually. But it's wide distribution.
We didn't hear anything.
Well, I was going to say how it's being distributed, but it's going to be huge. It's a big film. And then another film that I can't really talk about, that's the most exciting project of hands down for me than the other two. And so stay tuned.
Sounds like there's some, alignment here because you're such a sea expert and you've done a lot with sharks. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've done with sharks and what they're like and some of the myths surrounding them and their impact on the environment or the impact of their demise on the environment?
I don't know if I could summarize that very quickly, but I will say that it comes down to us and our species once again being unwilling to share the planet, or our rather twisted version of coexistence. Because we have these protected species that we're all striving to find ways to protect, and the ones that are already protected, where the same governments that list them as protected are intentionally killing them when they interfere with the perception of good vacation spots. And this is why a lot of people ask me why I don't do films about finning, and mine are about culling. And it's once again government manipulation and conspiracies and power that is achieved through fear of a phantom menace. And that is maybe not more true than with sharks. Once again, people don't believe anything I say about sharks until they see it for themselves. And we're out, we're supposed to be...
Try us.
Well, if sharks wanted us, I wouldn't be here speaking with you. I've been diving with them for 20 years, and with all the ones that everyone says are man-eaters and scary and whatnot. And they're like, and people often say, well, if what you're saying is true, what's with all these people being eaten? And I say, who? You read about it, it's happening all the time. Who? And again, it's the media and whatever you hear, and you just grab onto it. 5 people died globally from shark-inflicted wounds in 2017. 5 on the planet, and they were not eaten. They bled out. That's the scariest animal on the planet. Killed 5 of us.
And you've swum with them, and I don't know, what's that like?
Once again, I could talk until I'm blue in the face, and nothing will change your mind until you go under the water and see for yourself. Now I get it. They don't want anything to do with me. They've been here for millions and millions of years, and their purpose on this planet has absolutely nothing to do with us. They are not here to manage our populations. There's 500 and counting. There's 500 and counting species of sharks, and they don't all eat the same thing. They're designed for specific reasons and to carry out specific purposes within the food chain. And just like our animals here on land, you know, we disrupt that system, and we're disrupting it in the ocean because we don't want predators doing what predators are supposed to do.
And are they being slaughtered at
Absolutely.
record rates today?
The only people who deny that are the people that want to kill them, who call them plagues while oceans are decimated. You know, once again, forget the graphs, forget the statistics, watch a couple of minutes of footage of longliners and trawlers pulling in more dead animals than you can conceptualize in one video.
So, you know, what's killing the sharks is the bycatch. It's like if you're eating tuna, you're eating sharks. You're eating sea turtles, you're eating dolphins, you're eating whales. If you're eating any fish, because even if you're eating farm fish, what fish eat fish? So farm fish is, that's the same. Well, where do they get the fish from? They get it from the ocean. How do they get that fish? They get it from trawling, because it has to be the smallest shrimp, and that's just destroying it. So
I saw it firsthand when I gave up shrimp in 2006. I was a safety diver for a documentary made by a Canadian broadcast company, everybody. And a tactic that they used in order to get sharks to the area for the shoot they were doing was they came up to a shrimp boat and traded them beer if they would dump their bycatch overboard. And I was underwater just watching all these corpses float down. And it worked, we got the sharks. But there were turtles and everything else that you can imagine. And at the time, the statistic was 1 pound of shrimp for every 10 pounds of bycatch. In some cases, the statistics are worse.
Wow.
you
Amazing.
have the slaves that work in shrimp industry. There's a documentary on that. We have it in our film, a section of the slavery that happens for fish, particularly shrimp boating. It's just awful.
Yeah, I mean, not just slavery, but there's a lot of issues with just social justice issues with employment practices in animal agriculture too. That a lot of that has been exposed as well. I'd like to open it up for question and answer before we start our next film. I'm sure that the audience has a lot of questions. Yes.
I want to say thank you to Kip.
There is a microphone back there. Okay, Lanny is going to be walking around with a microphone so everyone can hear your question. Thanks.
My name's David, and I wanted to say thank you to Kip and thank you to
Skylar Thomas.
Yeah, and Kip, I watched your What the Health movie in 2017 on October 6th, and I became a vegan the next day. And I've been telling everybody about it, and I was 255 pounds, I'm 213 now. And I'm doing things that I dreamt about, and I'm back in it, and it's made a huge impact on me. So thank you. And thank you, Skylar, for doing it. Because I'm stronger and faster than I've been in a long, long time.
Let me repeat that. He's stronger and faster on the vegan diet than ever.
We think about what the health, which is, the industry tried to debunk a lot of the facts, and we didn't even go into it. We're in the next film, actually, one of the films are going to go into that. I did purposely
The debunking?
to try to debunking and who the people are trying to do that. They debunk it with studies from the industry. Oh, but with the film, What the Health, the whole thing, the goal of Keegan and I were trying to do is the arc of that health is really about your, beyond yourself, it's for others, it's community. It's why I go to North Carolina. That's a big thing about health, too. When people talk about, paleo, this and that, even if it is true and it does work for you, does it work for everyone else?
Does it work for the planet?
Does it work for the
animals?
Yeah, exactly. Does it work for your spiritual health?
The owners of Catholic Gratitude are Matthew and Therese Engelhardt.
Yeah, what's the son's name?
Riley.
Riley, nice, super nice guy, I'm so upset.
So I live, Andrea, my husband Doug, and we live in Inverness, and so the Point Reyes Seashore is our backyard, and I've driven by those little white huts thinking, oh, how nice they keep them warm when it's raining. And, what can we do to break that cycle? And I haven't drunk milk for a long time, and I drink almond milk, and then I'm thinking, well, they're the biggest use of water in California growing almonds, so what's...
Can I?
Yes, step in.
So a big problem that has been identified when the people I spoke to in the process of making this film, and there's a table out there called Save the Tule Elk, and they have a lot of information ready for you, but we agreed that a big problem is awareness. People don't know what's happening, and particularly in Marin County, where I watch the news headlines, and they are all heavily biased towards pro-ag. And, in that environment, it's hard to know that there's even anything to fight about. So making yourself aware and the people around you aware, maybe writing to those papers. In the process, people who saw some of the teasers I leaked out, they said they go on a tour bus that tells them that those babies are put there for their own protection because they will be otherwise trampled. I was like, okay. So once again, humans are teaching nature how it's done, how animals are done.
Okay, I have another question back here.
I want to actually add something to that, Lanny. As I mentioned, I had coffee with the CEO of a very, very large dairy company. And, we had an opportunity to talk about humane farming. And I got to a point where, he was explaining to me why the calves were separated. It was for their own good, because this is the party line. This is what they say. And I finally said to him, I understand. I really appreciate the interest of the organic farmers out here to watch out for, and to be in, to do things in the best interest of the calves. But I'm just wondering, if you go by a cow-calf operation, so if you ever drive, a cow-calf operation is a beef ranch, and it's typically black Angus, so you're going to see black cows, pretty much. You're going to see the babies with the moms. They're not separated. So I said, so how come on cow-calf operations are the babies with the moms? And he paused, and he goes, good question. I never thought about that. So what it is that even the cow-calf operations of the dairy farms have different stories. And, it's not like the cow-calf on beef ranches, the babies are somehow different from the babies on a dairy ranch. They're the same. They're all the same species. They're cows. It's just that you don't need to take the milk from a beef ranch. And so it's most expedient to keep the babies with the moms because you don't have to feed them as much that way. So
a quick shout out to my girlfriend who's been very supportive during the creating of this film. Becoming vegan was a process, I didn't just, I wasn't born that way, etc. And one of the things that was difficult for us was we really enjoyed wine and cheese. And I was like, well, if we visit one of these small farms and see for ourselves the production, maybe we can keep cheese, at least. And this was a tiny little goat cheese farm in Pescadero, and they very proudly, there were these two-day-old goats in a pen by themselves, quivering. And they proudly said that for the sake of the animals, that he'd separated from their mothers to prevent forming the bond. And I'm like, we have reached the point where we think we're good creatures for preventing a bond between a mother and a baby.
I talked to, this is years ago before Cowspiracy, I talked to a rancher and a dairy farm rancher, and we were emailed back and forth, and she said that they've been bred so long this way that the motherhood has been bred out of them. All right, conversation's done.
All right. Take the next question.
Hi, I'm Diana, and I'm also with the Save the Elk table in the lobby. And I just had one, thank you for your film, Skylar. I hadn't seen it yet. I've heard a lot about it, and I've read a lot about it. But I have a question, and you alluded to it in the previous answer, but what is because Marin is so pro-ranch, and I'm volunteer of the year at Point Reyes National Seashore. And yes, and I feel similar to you as what you said, is it's getting harder for me to come into this park that I've spent so much time working with and enjoying and helping with some restoration work. And so I feel confused as to how Marin can be so pro-ranch when it's creating so much harm. And I notice when I start talking about it with people, this, like, the wall goes up, and it's because it's very, very pro-ranch. So I wonder if you have any insights in what you've done to see how you can reach people in this way. Like, what are some of your approaches to get people to hear me when I'm talking about the issue?
Well, we've created the website, you guys created the website, restorepointreyseashore.org, with a petition now that has the information. It's no small challenge, because one of the things that I learned in the process is that employees of Park Service that raised questions or opposition to what they were seeing there basically got encouraged to seek employment elsewhere. So I don't know, this is all pretty new to me, because I do shark stuff and go out there to clear my head, and then I couldn't clear my head out there and made this short film. I'm still learning myself, but you got to start with awareness, I guess.
I'm kind of out of the loop on it. What is the latest? Is it kind of dying down? Is it looking good, or is it the ranchers are trying to really put a push to kill more, or what's the latest?
So the bill died in the Senate, but that doesn't mean it can't go back at the moment. But it went through the House like that, and it was like rather stealthily produced in the first place.
And I think one of the biggest things you can do is Jared Huffman, who was the sponsor of the bill, write to his office. Let our senators know where you stand, right to the Park Services. I don't know if I think there was a commenting period about the management of the elk. I think it's over now, but
it's going to happen again.
It's going to happen again. So really take a part, let your voice be heard, talk to as many people as possible. I know we have more questions back there. Deb, you had a question?
Yeah, I do. And thank you, Miyoko, for making this happen today. And thanks to Kip and Skylar for telling what's really important stories to all of us. I would love to hear some information about, I feel like every human being needs to be put in a room and watch these movies and more. And it's so hard, we all get it, we know it, and we understand the choices that we make, but can you give us some information about how your movies have been put in front of non-vegan audiences, maybe universities, schools?
Let's ask in fact, how many people here are not vegan? And don't be afraid to speak up, just raise your, good, that's what we wanted. How many of you are local from Point Reyes? Wonderful, this is, yeah. How many of you found that riveting and interesting, like information you didn't have before, or did you feel like, okay?
How many people are mad? No, I mean at me.
Okay, great.
Well, that's awesome. The goal, when Keegan and I are making Cowspiracy and What the Health, the whole thing is, I was eating meat and dairy and the whole thing for decades and decades and decades, and the whole thing was to follow the journey where it's when you're watching the film, you're on the journey with that you can relate to, of kind of like holding their hand, let's go on this journey together. And with Cowspiracy, that story really happened to me. It actually happened 6 years before Cowspiracy, finding out about that. So it's kind of like a little bit of reenactment at the beginning, but it truly happened. So, I mean, that's kind of the goal. The movies are not for vegans, it's for people who actually aren't, and to share them on a journey.
Okay, we're going to have just one more question, and then we're going to go on to.
We have a veteran and Native American here.
Okay, all right. Maybe we'll just save Vegan 2018 short if there's more interest in questions. I don't know.
So who is the veteran? Come on up here.
We're going to have one.
First of all, I'd like to thank the folks that organized this presentation. I came a long ways from the Upper Klamath River in the north part of the state to hear about and see Kyler's movie and be a part of Kip's presentation. My name is Chipkus. I'm a Karok tribal medicine man. I'm also a Vietnam veteran. I understand contamination when it comes down to the channels of the different streams and waters. We have a stream called Shasta Lake. It's been contaminated, and the Shasta River has been contaminated for over 40 years because of the cattle industry. We as fisher people on the Klamath River, Ishifish Falls, where we traditionally fish, last year our sister tribe, the Yurok tribe, at the mouth of the Klamath, had to eat chicken because of the salmon runs were so low. Now, millions of salmon used to come into the Klamath River, and now we have maybe 38,000 returning. That's less all the cannery boats that used to be out there 20, 30 years ago and the legislation. But I'm here specifically to thank Kyler and Kip and this group because this is a very deadly bill. House Resolution 6687 that talks about extending 5-year leases to 20-year federal land leases for the cattle and the ranchers. Now, if you don't think that is detrimental and you don't think it's a situation that we have to call attention to ourselves, let me talk to you about the elk. 2 years ago, they started the process in the state of California to do the state management plan for elk. There was a conflict between the elk and the cattle. They came together and there was diseases exposed. Elk can't read signs and they don't understand what barbed wire is all about. And we are still allowing, the state of California is still allowing the taking of our large elk, the adult elk. They are the leaders of those herds. So if you shoot a trophy elk and you put a juvenile out in charge of the herd, guess what's going to happen? We're going to have trouble. But this bill is deadly because it cleared the House on both the Republican and the Democratic side. It actually went through just like greased lightning. It wasn't until about a couple of weeks ago that I had the privilege of meeting this gentleman here, Jim Cota, and we had a couple of conversations, and at the very last minute, the bill moved over to the Senate side with Lisa Murkowski, the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee. It just so happened I worked with their father because I was chief of staff to Congressman Don Young from Alaska for several years. And I knew the father. All of us collectively were able to stop that bill on the Senate side. It's important. There was a lady over here that said, everybody should watch this movie. Jim and I are going to make sure every congressional leader on the House and Senate side on those specific committees are going to see a copy of this movie. understand the term historic. Our native tribes, I'm a Kara from Northern California, the Pomos, the Miwok, were all here along with the elk, long before the cattle ranchers showed up.
Let's hear it for the true historic peoples.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that we could have had the whole day on Skylar's film alone, but there is someone back here from the Restore Point Race website who has some information and like, lots of people have questions and information. I just don't think we're gonna have time for everyone, so maybe one or two more is how we were thinking.
Yeah, it really depends. I mean, we're going to show, we can continue the panel a little bit longer. I know Kip has to leave at 1:30. The movie we're going to show next is Vegan 2018, which you can watch on YouTube, but it is a great movie. So we can a couple more questions and then start showing that. And if we don't, we might have to end it early, but to get on to the next film, which is Cowspiracy.
Hi, I'm Susan Ives. My colleagues and I at the Resource Renewal Institute, we're behind the Restore Point Race website, restorepointraceseashore.org. And I know that Skylar relied heavily on it, and I'd like to just give you a little bit of information about what you can do. There's a environmental impact statement and a general management plan amendment that's wending its way through the National Park Service. There were 5 alternatives that the Park Service offered for public comment. That public comment period ended November 30th. With that input, hopefully there will be studies of those impacts, and they range from expanding ranching to ending ranching. So if you haven't had a chance to comment to this point, this summer we expect the draft plan and the draft environmental impact statement to be coming out from the Park Service. And that's a really important time, a really crucial time to weigh in and let the Park Service know of those alternatives, which ones you prefer. Now my understanding is that the Park Service preferred option is to manage the Tule elk. So if that's a concern to you as it is to me, I would
Can
really...
you explain what manage means, please, for everyone?
Yeah, what they mean by manage is essentially the free-roaming elk herds, the ones that are outside of the big pen at Pierce Point, the ones that are encroaching on the rancher's land, would be removed. And that could be lethally, it could be, they're talking about potentially shipping them off to Indian reservations. There's some problems, as you heard, because those elk have a disease that they caught from the cows, and it's a very remote possibility that those elk would then be moved off the park. So I'm hoping that with enough public pushback, enough public input, that the Park Service would be more open to other solutions. So if you are interested in learning more about it and receiving occasional updates that tell you the status of this process and at what point you can step up and make a comment, I would encourage you to go to restorepointraceseashore.org and sign up, and you'll be getting information from us. Thank you very much for coming.
We have some more health info here.
All right, I think we'll make this the last question, and then we're going to move on to enjoying the rest of the festivities and watching Vegan 2018.
Thanks for giving
And
me
Kip has to leave.
One quick thing is we're forelk.org. We're also working with Restore Point Race. We have a table out there right now where we are actually on the spot taking comments. You can write a comment and we will make sure it gets delivered, advocating alternative F for the general management plan. And if you want to get involved with our organizing to save the elk and work on restoring Point Race, come to the table and talk to us and get on our E-list. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Can we have a round of applause for Skylar Thomas and Rich Pennington? All right, we'll be back. We're going to show Vegan 2018 now, and after that, we'll be showing